Hey guys, Scripter here with another video, and I have to say, I think this media tour that Leslye Headland is doing the last week or two is ill-advised, I'll say. I'm surprised that somebody isn't stopping her from some of the things that she's talking about. Now, we knew when Kathleen Kennedy gave her carte blanche and said, make a show about you, about herself, we knew that's very likely what she was going to do. And we're seeing now, as she comes out with more and more and more answers to these questions that about the show, that the show is just coded in her worldviews and her inserting what she thinks things are in our planet on this time frame, on this plane, and really didn't put a whole lot of focus on a galaxy far, far away at all. And so much of what she's doing is modern stuff. And I go back to modern stuff here. I go back to Peter Jackson, and when they asked him about Lord of the Rings and sort of bringing in his personal views of the world into it, and he was very concise and very clear when he answered by saying, and I'm paraphrasing, but when he said, no, we are here to do a job, and that is to honor the story that Tolkien wrote. It is not up to us to insert any of our own politics or any of our worldviews into his universe that he created. And that's, in Star Wars, it's not as cut and dry only because there isn't a pre-written book. There's no book called The Acolyte. Now, mind you, there's a lot of expanded universe material they could have just simply adapted without changing things. But there isn't an Acolyte book, so she's writing the story. So that it's a little bit open-ended, but at the same time, George Lucas did incorporate his thoughts on Vietnam and his thoughts on a few sort of geopolitical, global political issues. But he didn't insert his own personal worldviews in terms of social politics very, very much, really. I mean, I guess he said that there was bigotry towards droids, but that's very kind of light in terms of inserting modern political stuff in. And correct me if I'm wrong, if you can find an interview where he talked about, feminism or the patriarchy or the matriarchy or anything like that. That was not in Star Wars. I mean, he made it pretty clear that he was using timeless things. We've talked about this before on my channel. Timeless, good versus evil issues that have been written about and humans have been dealing with relationally and stuff forever. And especially, of course, the Skywalker family dynamics and all that stuff that goes on with that. But Leslye Headland should really stop doing interviews because she's now going down this road of just pure modern social politics being inserted into Star Wars hard. And we saw it with the High Republic. They had to make it, they had to say that there's, trans characters, they couldn't just have the characters and we just get to guess what they are. No, we have to come out and say. You had that stupid droid in Solo that was so corny. Anyway, so let's just look at this here, and I'm just in shock, guys. Like, how this person was given this show, how this person was given a show with $180 million. We don't know where the money went. And just doubling down on, I mean, at least she's being honest, but just using this show as her springboard to pump her worldview and her moral relativist, and I don't need to tell you which political stance that belongs to. I'm sure you can probably put it together yourself. And so let's get into this. Leslye Headland, the showrunner for The Acolyte, explained that Osha killed Sol because of benign sexism. That's what we needed in Star Wars, was a little benign sexism to give me a reason to kill somebody. This is literally the worst Star Wars thing ever made. It's not even remotely Star Wars, other than just some lightsabers and stuff. In the final episode, Sol confirms to May and Kamir that he killed Mother Anastasia. Osha overhears the conversation and then confronts him. However, Sol makes it clear that what he did was the right thing to do, and that he did not inform the Jedi because he was trying to protect Osha, and she would have been sent away because she was too old to train and would have never been allowed to become a Jedi, which is fine, except he didn't give Osha the context and what was going on with the Darth Mom and how she weaponized the witches, and they were pointing blasters and they were pointing arrows at the Jedi. Their weapons were drawn, and then he fails also to tell her that Anastasia, instead of just saying, you can take Osha, because she had made that decision, decided to not say anything and turn into a dark demon fart cloud with fangs and start disintegrating. And then he looked over at May, and May was also disintegrating into the demon fart cloud, and he got spooked, so he stabbed the fart cloud, which somehow killed her, which also doesn't make any sense and is really stupid writing in and of itself. But alas, that's all Leslye could think of. If he would have just explained that, Osha was the reasonable twin, I'm sure she would have been like, well, I don't like it, and I'm still mad at you, but at the same time, I can kind of see where you're coming from. That would freak me out too. Okay, it's not as cut and dry as I thought. He doesn't even mention the fact that the witches all had weapons drawn on them and everything else. He just says, it's not my fault, I did the right thing, but he never actually explains what that right thing was and why. He goes on to tell her that he did everything because he loved her. However, the word love is cut off, and Osha begins to use the Force to choke him. As he's being choked, Soul tells her it's okay, which was ridiculous. He's basically, instead of telling her the context of what happened, he just lets her... He basically does the last thing a Jedi would do. Him allowing her to kill him is pushing her further to the dark side, is what that's doing. So he does the opposite of what he should do. And then he also lets her kill him on false pretenses by not giving her the accurate explanation of what happened. So he's literally doing the opposite of what a Jedi should do. He's leading her to the dark side. So I don't know if Leslye Headland has just never watched Star Wars or what, but it was absolutely stupid and ridiculous. But we know why it's stupid and ridiculous because of what she says next. Because again, it's not about making sense in the Star Wars world. It's about her worldview and her illustrating on screen this supposed negative trait in men. So let's go on to the next thing. In an interview with Collider, Maggie Lovett asked Headland, what's so interesting about that moment where Osha kills Soul is how much is conveyed even while he's choking on his words. Also, and maybe this was my impression of it, but my first thought was he doesn't even give her the agency to make this choice herself because he's accepting his fate. It just adds so much more insult to injury. You can't even let her get a satisfactory kill because you're like, it's okay, it's so good. Because that's what Jedi do. They give them satisfactory kills. So what she's saying is what? That if he would have explained to her exactly what happened and she still killed him, it would have been more satisfactory? No, it would have been more evil. And that's Maggie Lovett, okay? So that's not Headland saying that, but watch the response. We also knew, this is Headland, that it was always going to be the betrayal of the father, and I knew we had to juxtapose Luke's forgiveness on Vader's redemption. We're like, this is a story about the Sith, so that's not going to happen. So you make Soul leave out all the details so that you can make it happen. Good writing. She then affirmed Lovett's comment. See, this is where it's, you're absolutely right. There's this thing called benign sexism. And part of it is this paternal protectionism. It seems like a good thing, but like you said, there's this, I have to protect you from everything. I have to make sure you're okay. I have to tell you what track to get on. And then once you're on track, I need to support you. Okay? Ultimately, what happens is, again, this is a father-daughter relationship. As women evolve in their lives and develop their own personalities separate from their fathers, at some point they have to reject that protectionism. Okay. In my world, I have a 14-year-old daughter, by the way, and she's never been forced on any track other than don't do this bad thing that will harm you. As far as whatever else she wants to do, have at her. In my world, her separating herself from me will be when she's an adult. That doesn't include rebelling against me and hating me. It just means her going on to live her own life and eventually connecting with another guy and being with him. It doesn't have to be her rebelling and hating me. It just means she's an adult now and makes her own decisions now and makes her own money now and goes and does her own thing now. It doesn't mean rejecting me. Like, I am really curious as to how screwed up this woman's family is. And I think she thinks everyone's family is as screwed up as hers. Now, if your family is screwed up and you're listening to this, I feel for you. I don't blame you. I don't have anything against you. But I think it's important for people with screwed up families to acknowledge they're screwed up. To sit there and say that that's a normal way of doing things. To sit there and say that a daughter needs to rebel against her father, is not normal. Like, that's not normal. She might, and that happens, but that doesn't mean it's a good thing or that it needs to or has to or should. You can have a normal relationship with your kids and they can go off and become adults and you can keep in a normal relationship with your kids. They don't have to rebel against you. And they certainly in this case don't have to kill you. So, this is absolutely bizarre. But why would you insert your own life into a Star Wars show? Again, it was one thing when George said, I disagree with the Vietnam War. I'm going to base the Empire on the United States and the rebels on the Viet Cong. That's one thing. That's a sort of a distant connection. That's sort of it's not a personal one per se. It is in a sense because he cares about the Viet Cong and he cares about those people being killed, but he doesn't know them. He isn't one of them. It's sort of a distant sort of, oh yeah, I'm going to kind of base it on that. This is her literally writing a sect of characters, 2 characters, about her own personal view of father-daughter relationships, which is not a normal father-daughter relationship. It's not. It happens, but it's not normal. And I don't understand why you would inject your own personal family relationships into Star Wars. That is so utterly bizarre to me. And it speaks to an inability to write anything. I can only write a story if it's about me and my family. Like the same with the sister things about her and her sister. Like, this is nuts. I can't believe this woman was allowed to do this. Headland continued, again, I'm so proud of it. I have so many favorite moments in the show. I have like 100, and I'm happy to go through all of them right now. One of my, of course, well, you want to sit down and talk about what you did all day, every day. One of my favorite moments is when he says, I did everything because I love, and he's going to say, I love you. And not only is that a level of attachment that an unbalanced Jedi would have. You mean like Luke? Maybe Sol was ahead of his time. The whole point of the Luke-Vader dynamic was the love. That I've said this a million times, and I based my sequels reimagined on this. And when Finn finally takes over the Jedi Order at the end of it, his number one message is the Jedi move with love. They make decisions based on love, because Luke did that. That was the big change, right? The attachment change. Now, I don't think Luke would be running around saying attach yourselves to everything you possibly can, but at the same time, love is the number one thing, because if you look back at the story, the Emperor, Vader and Luke were never going to defeat the Emperor with power. That's what makes the Rey ending suck. It's just power versus power. It's the same thing we see in other IPs a million times over. Power versus power. Who's the most powerful? Luke and Vader won because Luke refused to fight. He said, I'm not fighting my dad. I love my dad. And he threw his lightsaber down. The Emperor tries to kill him. And then Vader's love of his son, in that moment, he picks up the Emperor and throws him before the Emperor can do anything. It wasn't power versus power. It was their love. That's a good thing. And if Sol had that 100 years before that scene took place, or whatever, 130 or 20 years before that scene took place, he was ahead of the curve. And she's pretending that it's bad. I don't think she's ever really watched Star Wars. I really don't. I don't think she's watched it before. Now, you can have the flip side where Anakin's attachments cause him to fly off the deep end. But that's also been marginalized by Disney now, because now we know that Grogu knew healing. There must have been somebody at the temple that knew how to heal or help Padme from dying or whatever. We do know that it's the same process, the healing process. This is according to Disney's canon, of using the Force to heal the snake and all that, and The Rise of Skywalker was the same process that Ben used to save Rey, to save her from death. So somebody must have known that, if Grogu can do it. So they've already muddied that water anyway. But this woman has a very, very strange view of parents and relationships, and I actually kind of feel bad for her. I think she's probably had some pretty crappy relationships in her life. And I think, you know, when you're Harvey Weinstein's assistant and you know what's going on, you probably don't have a whole lot of empathy due to whatever you've been through. Again, I'm not saying that's the case, but I'm saying it certainly seems that way. He was going to say I love you, and not only is that a level of attachment that an unbalanced Jedi would have, he very clearly is losing it in the last half of the season. Losing his attachment? But that's also the justification for that kind of behavior between the father and the daughter. The daughter has to surpass him in some way. She cannot stay a little girl or an adolescent or young adult. She has to, at some point, say, I reject what you have told me, and I need to do to make you proud, to follow in your footsteps. I have to reject what would make you proud and follow in your footsteps. She has to do that. She has to do that. So those of you with daughters out there, your daughter has to reject what you tell her. She has to. It's a rite of passage. This is nonsense. This is idiocy of the worst kind. And it's funny because when you look back as an adult, I went through a rebellious phase as a teenager. My sister went through a rebellious phase as a teenager. Neither of us, as adults now that have kids, look back and say, oh yeah, I really needed to do that. That was such a good thing to do. No, we look back and we're like, we were morons. What a couple of idiots to have rejected clear, obvious advice that was good for us. Why did we do that? We are dumb. like, I don't know what you guys, but if you rebelled as a teenager and spent all your money on drugs and stupid stuff and wasted, however much time just partying and being a moron to rebel against your parents, can any of you literally comment and tell me that you're happy about that? You might not be sad about it, but you're not like, yeah, that was good. I'm glad I wasted all my money on that instead of saving it. And I'm glad I had no relationship with my dad and my mom for 2 years while I partied and acted like a retard. Yeah, I'm happy I did. Nobody does that. We all look back and say, we did it. It's typical dumb teenage thing. We don't sit around and mope about it. But at the same time, we're not like, yeah, that was good. We needed that. Yeah. So she's actually promoting this idea in young girls, in her mind, through this show, is that, yes, you must rebel against your dad who's giving you advice, life advice, because, he's older than you and has lived life, and same with your mom, and maybe they know stuff because they've made mistakes, and so they're trying to help you not to make the same ones. No, you have to reject everything they say over some dumb... She's very childish. Isn't she 40? You're very childish, Leslye. This is this is how teenagers think, that they need to do this. And I don't want to make you proud and follow in your footsteps. This sucks. This show sucks. She concluded, I do think when he says, it's okay, I think you're right, which was ridiculous. He is imposing on her agency at that point, but I do think in a weird way she needed it. She needed his acceptance, not his approval. He already accepted her. What are you talking about? When everybody else was rejecting her, including the Jedi, he was... Which is it? Which is it? Is he bad because he had an attachment to her or not, Leslye? You just said it was bad that he had attachment to her, and now you're saying that his attachment, she needed it. She needed his acceptance. Which is it? You don't even know what you're talking about. You're just blabbering about nothing. I think maybe it's not even that deep. Maybe she's just making this up now, this whole teenage girl rebel against your daughter or your father thing, because she literally just wrote it and didn't know, and maybe this is just all made up then. I don't know, because she's talking out of both sides of her mouth. This just doesn't make any sense. So she needed his acceptance, not his approval, but his acceptance of his fate, I think, is what gives her the energy to do the final fist clench. Gross. That's disgusting, bro. Osha turned for no reason. She turned in 5 minutes for no reason. I don't know, maybe because she saw Buddy's pee-pee. That was it. Because Leslye Headland is so shallow. Her relationships must be awful in real life. And then he accepts his fate, and that's what gives her the energy to go to even further to the dark side, because Soul's an absolute idiot, because everyone in the show has to be stupid to move the plot along. So he just lets her kill him because he's an idiot. All he's doing is pushing her to the dark side, and he should know that. So she wrote him as a moron father because she thinks fathers are morons and teenage girls need to rebel against their moron fathers. Okay, fair enough. That's pretty terrible, but okay. Headland appears to be confirming that the entire show is about her own personal experiences rather than any kind of universal experience between fathers and daughters. Yeah. Yes. And that is so dumb when you're writing an IP that you're trying to appeal to the masses. That is really, really dumb. She's actually affirmed this in the past. In an interview with the New York Times, Headland stated, "I have a very strained relationship with my youngest sister, and I feel like one of the reasons it is strained is because we both see each other as the bad guy." No, you know why I think it's strained? This is just my opinion. I think it's strained because you're the bad guy, Leslye. You obviously have serious issues. And the way you view relationships, particularly with your own family, is extremely strange. I mean, if you've been through some form of abuse or something, then, I mean, that's understandable. But I think you're the bad guy. Wow. And if I was going to tell a story about bad guys, it seemed to me that the place to start should be a familial relationship where one person is adamantly convinced of her correctness and the other person is also adamantly convinced of her correctness, she continued. We don't speak. I think this will be a surprise to her. Why, Bob Iger, Kathy, why did you allow this person to insert her own personal story into Star Wars? Why would you allow that? Why would you allow that? That is the worst thing you can do. And again, I go back to Peter Jackson. Don't do that. Do what's right by the IP. Do what's right by the story, not what's right by Leslye Headland's relationship with her sister and father. Are you kidding me? This is, it's funny because the phrase, "this is Mickey Mouse." This is Mickey Mouse. That's a Mickey Mouse organization right there. Oh my gosh. Interestingly, later in the Collider interview, Headland provided more evidence to this theory. Lovett commented, I think that's what makes villains so compelling, because there is that little piece of every writer in the villains, kind of pushing an idea that they have harbored within them. The villain is a great proxy for getting those feelings out. Headland responded, absolutely. I very rarely put myself into the protagonist because I think the protagonist has to be the protagonist. Listen to this sentence. I very rarely put myself into the protagonist because I think the protagonist has to be the protagonist. Or you can just say, because you're not one. They might have a sprinkling of me. Certainly Osha and May, the family conflict, the switching of sides, being really certain that you know one thing, the betrayal of the father, the rejection of the fraternal protectionism, and saying, I am now my own person. That stuff I definitely relate with. But the stranger is my shadow self for sure. Oh my gosh. Is there anything your dad told you that you do accept, Leslye? Oh my word. In a previous interview with Collider, Headland also revealed that Khmer is an avatar for her. Aside from the obvious allusions to the other ships, are there any other enemies to lover dynamics that informed the decisions you were making as you were playing with these two characters? She replied, there are so many, but I'm going to say no because I was really working from muscle memory. I didn't want it to quote something else. I wanted to just click into the kind of stuff that I wrote when I was in high school. Oh, there it is. We literally got teenaged angst Star Wars. She's laying it out for us, guys. That's what this is. This is her teenaged angst, rebel against my father. I want to, experiment with my body with these people. Personal story jammed into Star Wars. That's literally what it is. This is just... Wow! At least she's admitting it. But how did this show get made? How did this get allowed to be made? Oh my gosh! Like, does KK really think that all the blue-haired girls are gonna just run to Star Wars now, and that's gonna save the brand? What were you thinking? Oh, I love The Stranger. There's always a character that's an avatar for me that I really, really love. And Russian Doll, it was Charlie. Barnett's character, Alan. I have no idea. I've never seen that. The Stranger is obviously a badass, but I just mean much more than his character. I'm not going around doing fantastic lightsaber battles and murdering people and being an all-around badass. But I would say that what he talks about in this episode and what he talked about in episode 5 is something I really dug down. When Osha's inner conflict fits with his ideology, and yet they're on opposite ends of the spectrum, just like she and her sister started at the beginning of the show, I wanted to stay true to my characters, but you didn't, because that isn't Osha's character. They were on the opposite ends of it. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, because Osha saw his wee-wee and whatever, he was talking to her like, even in the final episode, she's like telling him, no, I'm not going to get trained by you and you're a bum. And then 5 minutes later, because Soul says he killed Anastasia, she instantly turns evil. Even if Soul straight up killed Anastasia, like bad, like not even in the real context, like he just walked up and stabbed her. Osha wasn't the type of person that was just going to immediately jump on him and be like, I'm murdering you now. That was never her character at any point in the show at all. She was the opposite. Always. Until out of nowhere, she just snaps. It wasn't realistic. It was stupid. And you didn't stay true to your characters because you needed to do far more development than you did to make that scene believable, to make us really believe that Osha turned like that so quickly. I tried my best to just stick to the tropes and the stuff that I loved and tried not to think about, especially with the classics. Yeah, the stuff you love, what you know, your personal life, your personal family, your personal this. That is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. When you go back to George Lucas, when he go and look at his Wikipedia page and where he went to school, he learned about ancient literature. You know, let's look it up. So Leslye Headland wrote this about her own self. Okay, and you just wait a second here. Okay, so he attended, after high school, he went to Modesto Junior College, where he studied anthropology, sociology, and literature, among other subjects. That's why he has that broad scope in terms of timeless storytelling that he wanted to tell. Then he, at his buddy's recommendation, transferred to University of Southern California and studied the cinematic arts. But look at his background. Anthropology, sociology, and literature. So he's not writing from his own personal experiences whatsoever. He's writing from a much more broader palette. And Headland is writing this show from literally herself. That's all she talks about is herself. Osha's inner conflict fits with this ideology. Oh, it doesn't at all. You didn't stay true to your characters. I tried my best to just stick to the tropes and stuff that I loved and tried not to think about it. I think it would have been a little too quotes around it if that were the case. Wow. Just awful. I cannot believe how stupid this company is to have allowed this person to write this nonsense. This is blowing my mind. And every day more articles come out from interviews that she has made in the last week or two that just blow my mind even more. I mean, yesterday I was reading about her. She's going to destroy Yoda. She's already admitting it, that if they do a season 2, Yoda's going to be covering up what happened. Why does she think that everyone is an a-hole? Like, who are you surrounding yourself with, Leslye? Who are the people around you in your life? Have you ever been around nice, good people ever? Ever in your life? Is everyone just a shade of gray, doing bad things, piece of crap? Is that everybody? You've never been around somebody who was just a genuinely nice person in your life? I feel bad for you. Anyway, guys, there you go. This is the Leslye Headland show. This isn't even the Acolyte. It's the Leslye Headland Family Guy show. Let me know in the comment section what you think. If what you think about this insanity that this show is allowed to be made. And feel free to check out anything else on my channel if you see you would like to. And if you do like this content, please like and subscribe. It always helps the channel. And you guys have yourselves a really good day.